February 22nd, 2016, the Washington Post posted an article talking about the issue of no other than global warming. And this article talked about how the Earth is heating, and with the Earth heating, species are going extinct. Now that leaves some people wondering, is global warming, is it real? Does it exist? Has it happened before? And to all those answers, the answer is yes. All we have to look back is in human history. Now, when I say look back, I'm not talking about a few years. I'm talking to 2.6 million years ago, during the Pleistocene epoch. Now, the Pleistocene epoch, its definition is, broken down in Greek, means most recent or most new. Now, why is that important? Because it's part of this new current era. In this current era, we saw two different climates. We see the current climate, which is going through a global heating period. Then we see the Pleistocene epoch, which is a global cooling period. During this time, we must look at three key issues. First, we must look to tectonic movement and the climate, how those two are impacted life. Second, we can see the mammals and animals and the life on Earth at the time of this epoch. And finally, we must look to how we actually know these facts, and how these facts can be taken and further used in today's society. But first, we must look to the climate and also the tectonic plates. Now first we can look to our current map and see how our plates look today. Back to 2.6 million years ago, the plates, well, they haven't changed much, but there were slight differences. There were land bridges. Now what is a land bridge? A land bridge is a connection of land between two continents that allows life to spread from one continent to another. And this is important because it allowed animals to traverse from Asia to North America, from North America to South America. But why did this happen? We can look to the climate on that issue. Now the climate was much drier. Now we're from Kansas, so we're used to a dry climate. But there was another issue. It was going through a global cooling period. During this period, the mean temperature was 5 to 10 degrees below current values. So the annual temperature was around 40 to 50 degrees. Now why is that important? Well, it allowed the Earth to go through periods and seasons like we do today. But there was a sharp decline. During summer, the snow didn't melt. It never reached the temperature where all this melt was completely melted. So it started making ice sheets. At points, life science reports that these ice sheets covered most of North America, most of Europe, most of South America, and parts of Asia. Now the importance of this is that these ice sheets actually can be seen today. They made the formation of Greenland and Antarctica. Now the other key issues are the idea of glaciers. Now with these seasons, these glaciers would not stay put. These were actually mobile, pushing land, pushing ground further into the earth and pulling back. Now these are creating massive hills. And in Kansas you can actually see these hills if you go outside of Lawrence. These are how the Great Plains actually became more hilly, or have hills. But besides the climate, other things had to adapt. Most formerly is life. Now, to adapt to these current nature, mammals and animals had to get a thick layer of fur. If you look to the movie Ice Age, a very childish, but accurate in some descriptions of life during that time period, we can look to the ancestor of the elephant, the mammoth. Now, the mammoth had thick fur. Now, this allowed them to traverse long distances through these massive cold winters. But other animals were during this time period too, as a saber-toothed tiger, and unusually, the birds flourished during this time period. Now the seas during this time period were shallow because the water was going through the ice. The plants in this time period were those who could survive in dry climates, conifers, pines, those trees that could survive in a cold and dry environment. But there was new species that were sticking foot. Now, you know these species today because they are the top dog, humanity. Now, the current Homo sapiens began to evolve and began to spread during this time period, from Asia to America using this land bridge. Now, the Homo sapiens began to take foot and actually cause extinction events to occur. Now, this is important because humans today can see how we impacted them. But during that time period, we also impacted nature. Another key aspect is how humans perceived everything else. One of the legends that we learned today is about the famous unicorn. But the encyclopedia.com said on January 26, 2012, that this idea of unicorn can actually come from this time period. The reason is the rhino. Now, most animals had to change. We saw the saber-toothed tiger having massive teeth, but the rhino, it grew a massive horn. So these legends of unicorns can actually come from during this time period, from the rhino and its ancestors. But now that we know the climate, and we know how the Earth looked, and we know how animals and life were, we must learn how we know these facts. To understand this, we must look to current scientific evidence. And back to the 1800s, a professor named Lyell looked to shellfish and saw during the 2.7 and 2.6 million years ago, this sea life changed. It went from warm water shellfish to cold water shellfish. Now this is important because these shellfish show that life went through a massive change. Another massive change during this time period that we can see and that was recorded were from the La Brea tar pits in California. Now this can be seen from the University of California's article, which explained that this diagram, or this tar pit, preserved a woolly mammoth, humans, and other species of animals, giving us an idea what life looked like at that time. And from this life, we can actually infer what the climates were. If a woolly mammoth survived in today's society, it wouldn't, because it would overheat. It would have to live up north, or it would have to live in an area covered in ice. Luckily for that, at this time period, it showed by these animals' adaptations. Other ways we can prove that this time period happened was by how the Earth is actually looking today. These Earth and the hills that are made in where Kansas is and north were caused by these glaciers going in and out. This pushed the ground under and above. And furthermore, we can look to fossil records that showed an animal extinction event occurring around 13,000 years ago. Now, some may blame the humans in this case, while others blame the change in weather. Because at 11,000 years ago, the weather shifted from a cooler climate to a warmer. Now, this shift in weather allowed humans to actually step forward and repopulate and increase their foothold as the dominant species. Now, today we learned about the climate, tectonic plates, the life, and how we know. The sources that prove this were LiveScience.com, University of California Encyclopedia, and Britannica Encyclopedia. I hope to show you how this time period changed, and how what we can learn from this time period is that Earth goes through time periods of cooling and heating. During this period it was cooler. The Earth still resembled the same shape, locations were in the same place, but because of these cooling events, life changed. And so to adapt to this change, we must adapt to the climate. And if we do this, humans can continue to be the dominant species. But if we do not, we may face the extinction event that so many animals faced 13,000 years ago. I hope to enlighten you today about these topics. I hope that you learned one or two things about the Pliocene epoch, otherwise known as the Ice Age. Thank you.